Hello and welcome to a Mental Break podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Simpson, and today I have a very special guest on the show, Adriano Loparco.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the show, man. I'm really happy I roped you into doing this.
I'm very happy that you created this podcast because I love, the inspiration behind it, and I think it's just a great thing to have out there for people.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the support, and I'm glad that you want to be a part of the community I'm trying to build here on this podcast and strengthen the bonds of people that have mental health issues, and make just get the awareness out there a bit more, in any way that we can.
Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks again for being on the show. So we'll start off nice and easy, okay? So for the listeners out there, just tell them who you are, man. Just who's Adriano Loparco? What are you all about? Just give the audience, a couple little French fries of you.
Thank you, Taylor. So my name is Adriano Loparco. I live just north of Toronto, Ontario in the GTA, and I've known Taylor, luckily, for a handful of years now and had the pleasure of meeting him when studying songwriting and performance in college. I am a singer-songwriter myself as well as a music producer. And aside from that, I like spaghetti and meatballs, long walks on the beach, and I love music. All things music, I'm in.
Love it. Thanks, man. For those of you who don't know, Adrian also shot his podcast today, and I referenced that in my introduction. So he's returning the favor in this introduction. So I appreciate that little tidbit.
Although I'm a little upset that we both didn't say
Meat Lovers Pizza.
Meat Lovers Pizza. Ah, there we go. Because that is
knew
totally
it was coming.
our
You
thing.
knew it was coming. We love to see it. All right, so that's Adriano Loparco, everybody. We teed him up. He's my best friend, one of my best friends. He's a great guy. Couldn't think of anyone better to have on the show. All right, so I'd like to start off every show, and I'm sure I don't know if you've caught any of the episodes recently, but I did, my first guest was Lena. It was easy because, we live together, so easy first guest on the show. But I'm going to try and make it a habit for every podcast, every guest that comes on the show, to ask this question just to make sure that they're feeling okay, feeling comfortable. So I just want to ask, Adriano, are you feeling okay? Do you feel comfortable? Are you able to discuss topics like mental health? I know it's a sensitive subject for some, and I just want to make sure that, I didn't coerce you into doing this. I didn't force you to come here on your own will. I didn't pay you. Like, you're here. Are you feeling comfortable? Are you ready to discuss mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. As I've mentioned to you prior to coming on the podcast, I'm a little nervous about not being extremely informed and not having that many personal things to talk about. However, for the most part, what I have dealt with and what I am going through, yes, I'm consenting and comfortable to discuss.
That's good. We want to make sure that people feel comfortable coming on the show. We don't want to have it feel like you have to be here and you have to describe everything in every little detail, So I want to make sure the guests are comfortable coming on and talking about this kind of stuff, because I know it's, still a pretty sensitive subject in the world, and not too many people are comfortable talking about it. But this is what the show is. We want to be vulnerable. We want to open up about these things and make it more accessible to people,
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, man. And a big reason why I wanted to have you on the show, and like why I was so happy when you agreed, was because I want others' perspectives. Like, I could just go out and get people that I know that do struggle or are openly struggling with mental health problems and get their perspective on it. And I will. Like, those are the guests I'm going to have on the show, obviously. But I didn't want to limit myself to just those people. I wanted to bring people on that don't necessarily deal with it on a daily basis, or have an outsider's perspective, that aren't diagnosed or haven't dealt with, it that much in their life, or, whatever, in a varied degree. but it's cool to have people on the show that, to come in from their perspective and just shed some light on how they view it, how they see it, all that kind of stuff. So it's important that we have a wide range of guests on my podcast.
Absolutely. It's a very big topic, so that's probably the right way to go about it.
So we'll start with a base level question, Adriano. I just wrote down this question because I thought it's a good baseline to start from. And you can go into as much detail or not as much detail as you want. It doesn't really matter. I just want to know, like, what's your personal experience with mental health?
So that's a little bit of a tricky question.
Yeah, approach it whatever way you feel comfortable.
And I'll tell you why. Like, mental health is a very serious thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of people very close to me have struggled with it a lot deeper than I think I have. But I often find myself wondering what mental health entails and, like, if I can qualify things that I've experienced as mental health, because I've certainly never been diagnosed with mental health, but there's been times where I've wondered if I was dealing with something or if it was just a bad funk or do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like,
no, definitely, man.
I worry. I don't want to sound insensitive in the sense of saying something I've gone through is as serious as something someone else has gone through.
Hey, man, don't worry about feeling insensitive. Like, we want to be open on this podcast, and I always say to people, like, it's your own experience, man. All you know is what you know. And it's okay. Like, if feel what you feel. Just because you feel like your problems that might not line up with somebody else's problems that have, dealt with worse or whatever, and, in society's spectrum of what worse is, that doesn't matter. Like, it's your own experience. Whatever you dealt with is whatever you dealt with, So I just wanted to start there, just to see, like, where your head was at in your own personal experience with mental health, No, it's totally cool, man. You're allowed to have your own viewpoint on it and stuff. So to piggyback off that, were there ever, like you said, there was moments that you felt like you could possibly have some sort of mental illness or struggling with your mental health?
Yeah, and I think this might be the wrong thing to say, but I do think that most people at some point in their lives come to a crossroads where they have to deal with mental health, and in different severities and different forms, of course. However, in the day and age that we're living in with the coronavirus and the lockdowns and everything that we're going through, I can't imagine a time where there's been more, like.
Yeah, it's been a crazy time for that, man. Like, people that didn't experience it before are now experiencing it, right? And not knowing what it is, or not knowing where to point the finger, because they were unaware of it before, or they've never dealt with mental health before or whatever. And now they're experiencing depression because of the isolation, maybe a bit of anxiety, whether that's social anxiety or just generalized anxiety because of being cooped up or being too hard on themselves because they have nothing to do if they're out of a job now, or like there's so many different outcomes because of this pandemic and this outbreak. Like it's caused a lot of different issues popping up everywhere in lots of people. And I remember you even said to me, like, a few weeks ago, we were texting back and forth, and you were saying, like, you were in a slump or whatever, and you were feeling, like, unmotivated and stuff, or burnt out, and that could be signs of, like, a bit of depression or a bit of generalized anxiety maybe, or it could stem from a lot of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've fallen in and out of phases of anxiety and depression before, and, it's something that I've luckily been able to always pick myself up out of, but, like, it's also something that's kind of easy to fall into if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so easy to slip into that mindset, isn't it? Well, my next question for you, and thank you for sharing that. It was very nice. So I just have here, like, because you don't exactly suffer from mental health or like mental illnesses, like you haven't been fully diagnosed. I wanted to know your kind of perspective of, do you know anyone personally who you know suffers from mental health issues or stuff like that, and like what, being someone that hasn't been diagnosed, I'm sure you've, like you said, you've dealt with your fair share of, your slumps or whatever, and not knowing if that was depression or, some form of mental health issue. Um, so from someone being on the outside looking in, do you know anyone personally, like anybody comes to mind, a friend, family member, whoever, like what's your perspective of a person on the outside looking in and seeing that person going through that?
It's horrible. It's horrible. I've unfortunately been on the outside of a lot of very close people to me dealing with very heavy anxiety, with suicidal depression, a bunch of things, and it's sad. It's sad, you know, wanting to be in there with them, helping them through it, but like often not really knowing what to do or say because it's such a personal thing that you can't necessarily just in my experience, like it's almost hard to tell them exactly what they're feeling and how to get out of it because there's a whole curve about like trying to understand what the person's going through first,
Mm-hmm.
really. And it's horrible seeing somebody you care about go through it.
Yeah, it really is, man. Do you find that, like I know you really well, but for people that don't know you, like you're a really caring person. I know that you would
I
try
love
your
you.
best for anything, to help someone. Um, but yeah, in terms of the mental health stuff, like if you don't really know a lot about it in the first place, it is really hard to come from an outside perspective and try to do your best to kind of understand. So, I guess my question to you is like, do you, as a person on the outside looking in, do you find it difficult to understand fully? Um, and if so, like, kind of elaborate on that experience with it within yourself.
I don't find it difficult to understand. And I don't I also wouldn't say I'm on the outside looking in of of um the feeling as much as in these scenarios I'm on the outside looking in of this person's mental
Right,
health.
right, because you've had your bouts of what you feel are depression.
Sure, yeah. And wait, sorry. So what's the question again?
The question
Um
was like, do you find it hard, or do you find it hard to understand? Um, let's put it this
okay.
way: not being formally diagnosed and like knowing somebody that has been diagnosed with a mental illness. Like, do you find it hard to
Yeah.
understand that perspective of things? And then like, how do you approach it? And like, what is that experience within you knowing that?
Well, this is interesting because I might be wrong in saying this, but like I would say there's probably just as many people that aren't diagnosed as are, right?
Absolutely. No, that's definitely
Unfortunately, I
a
think
right thing to say.
I think there's very possibly a ton of people who deal with things maybe like I just said. I don't know what the fuck it is, and oh shit, can I?
Yeah, yeah, no, go
Can I?
go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Um, a lot of people that experience things and they're like, I don't know what the fuck is happening to me, but never really went the route of getting diagnosed. So, like, like I was saying, I think a lot of people might not be diagnosed in what they've gone through, and how I approach it is differently depending on the situation and on the day. There's been times where I've helped somebody dealing with some mental health in a very loving and supporting way. There's days where I've helped somebody who I care about that needed to hear something that was a little bit more what they need to hear and not what they want to hear. So I think when trying to help somebody else going through something, It's obviously not a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
a little bit of a give and take of showing love and support and understanding of what the person's going through. And then once you feel safe enough to do so, and if you're close enough with the person, there's times you need to tell them what they need to hear, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really hard dynamic to approach, right? Like when does it call for what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like where do you draw
Luckily,
that line in the sand of giving them the love they need, or giving them the hard love that they need? You know, like it's still, you're approaching it positively no matter what. Obviously, you know, like it's constructive criticism or whatever you need to give them to, or whatever they need to hear at the time. But that's always tough of like not knowing where that person's at in their mind, and like
yeah,
delivering it in a way that makes it as most constructive as possible. You know?
of course. And I I mean, luckily every scenario I've had where I've had to give tough love, it was given gently, obviously,
Sure.
and understanding of the fact of the situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Totally.
I
And
said, it's when somebody's the one trying to help, it's important to really just gauge the severity of the situation and the stage of the situation,
yeah, and like
right?
read the person too. Like are they receiving what you're giving them properly?
Yeah, yeah,
That's super important. And I do want to preface, like earlier, just so everyone knows, like if you feel things, that's totally valid. I'm not saying you have to be diagnosed as like that's the end all be all. Like I don't want to take away from what you're experiencing. Is what I'm trying to say.
of course, of
You know,
course.
I'm not saying that like, oh well, you're not diagnosed, so like fuck you. But like that's not at all the intention of what I was trying to get at. I was just simply trying to get an outsider's perspective that isn't fully diagnosed to
Yes,
somebody that
I
is.
understand.
That was the
Yeah,
only intention of that. It's just if
of
anybody was
course.
listening, it was like, what? You know, like it's totally valid, whatever way you feel. And like you said earlier in the podcast, there's probably so many people that aren't fully diagnosed that do suffer from mental health issues or mental health problems or illness, sorry, and just aren't properly diagnosed because the avenue just isn't there for them, or you know, maybe they grew up in a family that doesn't believe in that kind of stuff, or religion, or whatever have you. You know, like there's hurdles that they can't overcome to get that diagnosis, to get the help they need. You know, um, so like if you feel like if you're depressed, or if you feel anxious all the time, or if you feel whatever, like you're totally allowed to feel these things. But if it gets to a point where it's like inhibiting your life, please go see someone about it. Like reach out to somebody, talk to somebody about it. Like just gauge the situation within yourself, um, and that way you can get the proper help that you need, or a proper diagnosis. You know, so that you can know for sure what's going on with you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And just to piggyback off of what you were saying, if anybody listening is feeling some things that are really heavy, at least talk to somebody. It doesn't need to be anything formal. It doesn't need to be a psychiatrist. It doesn't need to be a psychiatrist, a doc. It just, even if it's a friend, I truly believe that at the very least, reaching out to a friend or a loved one and just word vomiting out things that you're feeling and trying to get somebody else's perspective on it, it's therapeutic on its own right. And I've had I've had friends and myself who have done that, who have luckily been able to get over heavy hurdles by the support of loved ones. And I've also had friends and loved ones who have found success in reaching out to a professional. So it's just like you were saying, it's very much not a one size fits all approach, but at the very least, if there's one takeaway, it's just don't go through it alone.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Very well said. I mean, like, yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, baby steps, you know, like The first thing is just reaching out in whatever form that is. Like you said, it doesn't have to be a doctor right away. Like if that scares you, like if you're not ready for that step, like, but if you feel isolated and you feel alone, or if you feel like you're down more than usual, like the first step is just reaching out to somebody, and then just build it from there, and it gets easier as you go along, but it's super important to not feel like you are alone in this. And that's kind of the whole message of this podcast. It's like I'm bringing these people on, like Adriano and Lena and future guests, to show people that everyone deals with this, diagnosed or not. Like, it doesn't matter, like we were talking about.
Like I was saying, I really do think that most people in their lifetime will experience some sort of mental health.
Yeah.
And, life just gets hard sometimes. And in the day and age that we live in, it gets easy to not prioritize taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be, dietary, food, relaxation, and personal time, or like
Sunlight.
Like there's a million ways to easily let something slip in your life and kind of have that lead into a little bit of a dark hole.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And like you said, like this is a crazy couple of years we've been living in. And
Oh my
I think
goodness.
it's
Now
more
more
important
than
than
ever.
ever to start talking about these things,
Yeah.
So my next question for you, Adriano, is: has there been any hard times for you personally in your life that you can remember, or someone else that was close to you, that was super difficult for you to either watch, be a part of, anything like that? Either within yourself, you could do both, within yourself and somebody else. It's up to you.
By far the hardest experience I've had seeing someone I love go through mental health was you.
Was me.
And we got through it.
I mean, we're sitting here right now talking about it, so yeah.
A million meat lovers pizzas later, and we're good, I think.
Yeah, something to do with that beef, I guess. I don't know.
So,
But yeah, talk about your personal experience first. Like, what was there any hard moments in your life that you had to sit down and go, man, like this isn't okay?
one of the biggest forms of mental health that I've dealt with myself is an anxiety in form of germophobia.
Oh yeah, this is a good one. I mean, not a good one, but a good one to talk about. I mean,
the germophobia stage of my life is something that was at its worst before you and I ever knew each other. But there was times where it completely consumed me, and the anxiety I got from it felt crippling.
wow.
It's weird to revisit those feelings because I've been able to luckily dial it back, and but that's probably the worst form of anxiety that I've dealt with for a couple years of my life. It was pretty severe, but it's kind of been like, even still today, I would consider myself a germaphobe, and obviously in the pandemic that we're in right now, things have been heightened a little bit, but I've luckily been able to keep control on that. So
I was gonna
I
say,
think that
like, I
answers the
can't
question.
imagine having that those few years ago you were talking about, and now being in a situation that we are right now, where we have to wear masks, and like you can't breathe or touch anything without being scared of contracting this virus. Like, that must be seriously affecting you in some way, either subconsciously or not. Like,
Yeah. It's not a fun thing to feel, especially in what's going on right now. But like I said, luckily I've been able to kind of keep a good grip on it and not let it get as bad as it used to be.
yeah.
So,
So like, I don't want to dive too deep because obviously it's a sensitive topic in your life, but just so the listeners get an understanding of where you're coming from in those years, like take us down that road, like that perspective of that anxiety you deal with the germophobia. Like you were saying, it got to a point where it was like almost inhibiting you in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. It. I've been a germaphobe for my whole life. I was raised by a couple of germaphobes.
Right.
There's
So monkey
not
see,
my
monkey
entire
do.
fam. Yeah, not my entire family, but there's, it was definitely a germaphobe was definitely something that I didn't just develop myself. Um, and yeah, it got pretty messed up, man. Like one of the biggest and crippling things was the fear of getting sick or some type of disease that was out of my control.
Right.
Like the fear is of like getting something that I can't control.
Right. Well, that's the
One
anxiety right there, man.
and one like it being out of your control, like that's something that's very serious in the coronavirus. Like you can obviously contract the virus from anywhere,
Yeah.
really. Like if you're going to the grocery, like, and it's out of your control, right? Like you can contract the virus no matter how safe you try to be, but like the littlest slip up can sometimes lead to dire consequences in some people's case, and like that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. I can only imagine, man. I mean, as someone is, I wouldn't say I'm a germaphobe, but like I have OCD, so like, an inherent trait of OCD is the cleanliness thing, right? So I've always washed my hands a lot and all that kind of stuff, but it's never gotten to the point of severe anxiety like you were talking about with your germophobia, like how it was inhibiting you at some points in your life, like at every corner you'd think about, oh, I can't touch this, or I gotta wash my hands after doing this, like, or else I might get sick, I might get a disease, like, and
Or if you knew you had to be in a situation where somebody else was sick and you couldn't you just couldn't get out of it.
right.
Like those were the crippling moments where it's like, oh my god, I feel like I can't, like I'm about to be put in a situation that's out of my control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Would you
So
say you're a bit of a control freak, for lack of a better term? I know that's not a politically correct term anymore, but like a fear of control, is that something that you still struggle with now?
I don't know. At times, possibly.
Hmm. Well, welcome to the podcast. I make you do a deep dive on yourself. Well, man, moving right along, I guess we covered that pretty well. The next question I have for you is a bit more on the lighter side, seeing as we
Okay.
dove deep in the dark side of things, with your own personal experiences with the negative and seeing other people in your life going through the negative. Is there any positive moments to add in relation to the moments that you had previous with the negative stuff? Like, were there any positive moments coming out of the germophobia in those years that it was the worst for you? Or in the experiences of the people we talked to, me, or anybody else that that has mental health that you watched go through, whatever. Any positive moments at all that came out of these negative moments?
Yeah, the positive moments is the end of the movie where everything's sorted out and better, like from the outside looking in, seeing somebody get over some of their dark hurdles and knowing knowing you had a hand in helping them along their journey is extremely rewarding, and it really just strengthens relationships and helps you look at somebody and go, hey, if you got through that, you can get through anything, right?
Does that inspire you?
Absolutely.
Because then you can use that fuel in feeling that way to get through your own stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So in terms of like personal, like positive moments, what are some of the biggest ones that leap out to you? Like go back to those years of of that fear of control with the germophobia and stuff. Like, when did that start turning around for you? Was there like a positive moment in time that like you started noticing that you were gradually getting out of it?
I'm sorry, there just wasn't.
Yeah.
Like at some point, my mindset just shifted. Like I forced it to shift, obviously,
Right.
because I was tired of being in the feelings and headspace that I was in, and obviously with the help of loved ones, I was able to have a little bit more control on it.
Okay.
I can't really tell you a specific story or time as to when that happened.
That's cool. But like you said, you made that shift in your mind.
Yeah.
And maybe it didn't happen overnight, or maybe it wasn't a specific moment, but like gradually over time, you made up that decision.
Yeah, I'm always very much of the mindset of like being strong. Like I think there was a point in time when I was feeling the most vulnerable where like I told myself I need to be strong and I need to be in control and beat whatever this darkness is that I'm feeling.
Right.
So there was definitely a point in time where over time, it didn't happen overnight, but and like I said, it's our mental health is something that we need to constantly be tending to. Yeah, I was able to kind of just make things better.
Nice. I see what you did there. That's great, man. And like I'm super happy that you got out of that because, as someone that deals with OCD, like I know how debilitating that sense of control can be. So like from one control freak to another, I understand. And it's a daunting task to battle that mindset, to confront that and be like, hey, this is not the way I want to feel. And like what are the steps that I need to take to get out of this mindset to make myself feel better so that this doesn't control my life anymore.
Now, the more that we're talking about it, like I guess I totally am a control freak, and it's something I didn't really think about, but like I'm just thinking about like life right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I totally am. Like the things that give me the most anxiety are things out of my control.
I think that's a really big thing for a lot of people, my friend. And it's good that you're realizing this because, yeah, it can be super debilitating. But it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. Like you're making the right steps into noticing that this is a trend in your life. Now it's just a matter of like, yeah, you've recognized it now. It's like, it's in front of you. So it's like, what are the next steps I have to do to ease this? You know what I mean? So realizing this in yourself and like realizing the positives that have come out of these years of, being strong and like you said, and pushing forward and changing that mindset. What are some other goals or like other directions you can stride in to maybe help yourself, ease that tension of the control? Anything come to mind at all?
No.
Hey, that's okay, man.
Yeah, sorry, just nothing completely comes to mind. Like I said, the biggest thing I've realized in myself and in others is mental health is very much a maintenance game.
Absolutely,
It's
man.
very much taking care of yourself, learning the points in time that you need to take care of yourself. Like for example, one of the biggest reoccurring themes in my life is burnout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that spawns a whole set of emotions every single time that comes about. So, for example, knowing myself and knowing when I'm approaching burnout, like being better at taking care of myself along the way is just the way to go. It's a maintenance thing.
Well, there you go, man. You talked it out of yourself.
Yeah, buddy.
And that's great, man. That's great. Okay, man. I mean, that's all I got question-wise in terms of mental health stuff. Are there any like closing words or final thoughts that you have for any of the listeners out there? the Adriano perspective on things in terms of mental health?
Yeah. Once again, I said it earlier in the podcast. Doesn't matter who you talk to, but do not go through the deep points of your life alone. Whether it's a loved one, whether it's a professional, there's people out there who are there to help you. And yeah, take care of yourself.
Awesome, man. No, very well said. Just reach
And
out and
to anyone who needs to hear it, I love you.
we all love you, man. We all love you. We're all here for you. Join the community. I'm trying to break the stigma. All right, my friend. Well,
All right, bro.
at the end of every
Well, thank
episode,
you.
I always allow the guests to have any plugs or anything like that in their life going on. So, Adrian, you got anything coming up in your life that's cool and exciting that the listener should know about?
Well, sure. 2 Instagram pages, pretty much. It's Adriano Loparco Music or Stone Roof Studios. I'm luckily always working on some type of fun projects with myself or fun people like Taylor. So if anyone kind of wants to, reach out or say hello or see what I'm up to, those are probably the places to do so.
Cool, man. I mean, that was my other question was like, where can we find you? But you answered both at the same time. So there you go.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug something for you. Adriano has a podcast / live performance show, I guess you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we just filmed one for me previous to filming this podcast. So how about you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So an exciting thing that I'm putting together right now is called the Stone Roof Spotlight Podcast, where I interview artists and talk about new releases of theirs in the local music scene, and then it gives them a platform to discuss what they have going on, to deep dive into their song, and then they do an acoustic performance at the end of it. So I don't know exactly when that's going to be coming out. I don't know when this is going to come out, but if you check out my socials, I'm sure I will be sharing it and allowing artists to tell their stories. So I'm very excited about that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course, man. Anything to help a fellow artist out and a fellow podcaster now. Yeah, dude, it sounds like a super cool project. I'm really looking forward to listening and watching everything that comes out about it.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
With that being said, man, thank you so much for being on the podcast, buddy, and opening up about mental health and stuff.
Thank you for having me, man.
It was really good to hear your insight and your perspective on things, man. It was cool.
Thanks, bro.
No worries, man. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode of the podcast. Bye.
Bye.